Welcome to the Mama Village podcast, your go-to resource for all things pregnancy, birth, and postpartum. From positive and informative stories to expert advice, this platform is designed to help you feel informed and remove fear as you journey through motherhood. Join this community as we share stories that warm the heart and expert insights that inform the mind. I'm your host, Ellen. Before we delve into today's episode, the Mama Village would like to take a moment to acknowledge and pay our respects to the traditional custodians of the land in which we gather, work and share these stories across many lands in Australia. The Mama Village recognises the traditional custodians of the land and recognises their enduring connection to this country and extends our respects to elders past, present and emerging. It is important to recognise that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander women cultivated a profound connection between birthing and the land. For generations, these communities have woven birth stories into the fabric of their cultural identity, creating a tapestry of knowledge that transcends time. As we explore birth stories and education, we acknowledge the importance of preserving and revitalising traditional birthing culture, recognising the profound impact it has had on the understanding of birth as a sacred and deeply spiritual experience. Hi everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Mama Village podcast. Today I'm thrilled to introduce you to our first international guest, Brittany, all the way from Southern California. In today's episode, Brittany shares her empowering journey through pregnancy and her beautiful hospital birth story. After feeling pressured by her OBGYN about her rapid weight gain that didn't reflect her overall health, she made the brave decision to switch care providers and hire a private midwife and a doula. Brittany's experience highlights the importance of finding supportive care that truly understands and respects your body and your journey. Brittany will also take us through a touching moment in her postpartum journey, an intuitive ceremony in her first shower after giving birth, where she expressed gratitude to her incredible body for carrying her baby, giving birth, and healing postpartum. Brittany also opens up about the challenges she faced in the postpartum period and how she sought help through a postpartum doula, counselling, and lactation support. This episode is a heartfelt reminder of the strength we all possess, the importance of community, and the journey of motherhood. Before we get into today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform. Now let's get into Brittany's inspiring story. Hi Brittany and welcome to the Mama Village.
Hi Ellen, so happy to be here.
I'm super excited to have you on here today. Do you want to start by telling the listeners a bit about yourself, like your age, who is in your family and where you're from?
Sure, so I'm 30 years old. My family is just myself, my fiance Cody, and my daughter, who's now 5 months old. Her name is Liliana, and I'm originally from Minnesota, but we currently live in Southern California.
Ah, nice. And you're our first international guest, which is super exciting.
Cool.
Well, let's get into your pregnancy. So did you do anything to prepare to conceive with your daughter?
Well, not really. So I have endometriosis, and my doctors were always saying, like, I'd ask them about fertility concerns and they're like, oh yeah, it might be a little difficult for you to get pregnant. So I was sort of like, oh, okay, so we weren't really very careful. And surprise, here she comes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, such a blessing, like the best surprise ever. So grateful to be a mom.
Oh, that's so nice. And so how are you feeling then physically and emotionally throughout the pregnancy?
Well, let's see. At first, I was feeling really ill. Like I had a pretty horrible morning sickness. I wouldn't say like completely debilitating, just a lot of nausea. But I experienced a lot of headaches, like a ton of migraines. And so that was really debilitating. That was really tough at first. I had to go into a neurologist and try and figure out like, okay, what medications are all right for pregnancy? Not very many. So it was tough. It was tough going for a bit. But, by about week 10, I was feeling much better. I had sort of tweaked my nutrition to give myself a lot of protein, really like focus on like all those really good minerals like magnesium and focus on my B vitamins, and I was feeling so much better by 10 weeks with the nausea. Unfortunately, the headaches continued, but as I was able to eat more, they did reduce, so that kind of helped out. And then by the second try, I had so much energy and I was feeling so much better. and the third trimester, I still felt really energetic until about, the end where you start to get so fatigued.
Yeah. And so did you have headaches prior, like before you fell pregnant, or is this a pregnancy-related symptom for you?
I did. I have migraine with aura, and so it is kind of like a complex neurological condition. Some women, when they're pregnant, get a break from their headaches, and some women, when they're pregnant, get even more headaches. And I was unfortunately one of the ones who got more.
And you mentioned taking certain vitamins and minerals and those sorts of things. Did you speak to somebody about creating a plan for you, or was this all research that you did? How did you know what your body needed at that time?
Well, my doctor recommended B6, vitamin B6, supplementing that a little extra, even though I was already taking a prenatal. So that really, really helped. And then also just my own research, like magnesium is really helpful for migraine. Just little things that I added in that ended up really helping. And I think the biggest thing was just increasing my protein intake.
Yeah, for sure. And so what was your perception of birth before you fell pregnant, especially if this was a surprise for you? And yeah, let's talk about what was your perception of birth before you fell pregnant, and then did that change at all once you found out you were pregnant?
So before I was pregnant, I kind of always wanted kids, and I was always a bit curious about childbirth. I was also really intimidated and pretty scared by the idea, just because of that's what we see in the media, right? This terrifying scene of this woman screaming, laying on her back on a bed, and I was like, I don't think that's for me. So I sort of got interested in natural birth, and I had a fascination with it, and I actually wanted to become a doula before I fell pregnant. And so I started sort of researching, and then as soon as I fell pregnant, I just really nerded out, and I got so many books and just started reading, and I became really passionate about just learning and gathering knowledge. And I found that the more I knew about birth, physiologic birth, the more empowered I was and the more confident I felt, and the less scared I felt of actually giving birth and realizing okay, this is something that I can do. This is something that we can all do. And yeah, it was actually really cool, seeing the before and after in myself.
Isn't it amazing? Doing the research and getting informed and learning so much about birth can just change one's perception completely. I love it when women embark on this journey and just how their perception evolves and then where they're at now. It's so great to hear, and I love it. So what was your model of care? And I imagine in the States, your models of care look a little bit different to ours. So can you go into that a little bit as well?
Oh yeah, definitely a bit different. So I guess the standard here is you go to an OBGYN, and they're your primary doctor, your primary physician, and you go see them every month at first, then every couple weeks, and then every single week until you give birth. They poke you and prod you and test you constantly. It's a lot of ultrasounds. It's a lot of blood tests. It's a lot of, check-ins. They're constantly weighing you. They're constantly trying to find out what's wrong with the baby, what's wrong with you when there's nothing really wrong. You don't feel bad. It's kind of it's an interesting thing. So I started out with an OBGYN, and that was my model of care. And then I realized, I kind of looked into it a bit, and I realized that my insurance covered a midwife. And so I was having some trouble with the OB. They were very fixated on my weight, because when my morning sickness stopped, I was like, oh my gosh, I can eat. So I started eating a lot more. And then of course I gained more weight, and the baby started growing more too, because it's the second trimester. And she's like, oh, you're gaining weight rapidly. And it just became this fixation. And they wanted to do all these ultrasounds. Oh, we have to make sure your baby's not too big, which is so silly. But in hindsight, it's so silly. But in the moment, it's scary, because you're like, oh my gosh, am I going to have to get a C-section? It's this whole, cascade that happens, and it gets really scary.
Yeah. So what made that decision for you? How did you decide then to change from your OBGYN to your midwife?
Well, I guess I kind of got sick of it. I hired a doula, and she was like, that doesn't seem you look fine to me. You seem healthy to me. Have you looked into midwifery? And I was like, actually, no, let me check it out. And so I switched, and completely different vibe, completely different energy. So much better. Like, body positive care is like, oh, so good. I didn't feel worried at all anymore. They checked me out and they were like, baby looks great. Heartbeat sounds great. You look great. You're doing great. Like, awesome, you know? It was like day and night. And so, yeah, my doula definitely helped encourage me to switch.
Yeah, amazing. Because I think there's a lot of fear around that. I mean, I've even had that fear too. So going into my second birth, I knew I didn't align with my care provider and I still didn't change. I think a lot of fear came up for me in that moment. So good on you for taking control of your power and your intuition, saying, no, this isn't right for me. I'm changing my care provider.
Exactly. I had this vision of what I wanted my birth to be, you know, this physiologic birth without all these interventions. And already I'm feeling like they're pushing interventions. And I'm like, no, time to switch it up. And I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah. So then coming back to your model of care, so you moved to a midwife, and then was the plan to birth in a hospital with your midwife?
So yeah, I guess home births are starting to become more popular here. It just wasn't going to work for me. It was, you know, a financial thing also, but I also lived in a pretty small apartment that had really close neighbors, and it was my first time giving birth, so I didn't know. Like, I wasn't familiar with them, and they didn't know me, and I didn't want them to, like, call the police or something on me. Like, making sounds and, like, going through labor, you know, and giving birth. So I didn't feel like it was right. So I did end up planning for a hospital birth.
Yeah, okay. And so when you have a midwife, when you're birthing in hospital in the States, I presume it's a private midwife that comes with you to the hospital, but you sort of pay her separately. And then does the midwife have admitting rights there? How does that all work? Because in Australia, it varies from state to state, but basically a lot of private midwives don't have admitting rights in hospital. So if you were choosing a hospital birth but paying a private midwife, they were more like your support person rather than your midwife in the actual hospital because they didn't have admitting rights there. So how does that all work over there in the States?
So there are a couple different ways. I am most familiar with like the practice that I went through. So the practice was actually run by an OBGYN, and he actually hires midwives to work under him. And so in that way, they were able to get access to a midwife at the hospital. Yeah, so that was how it worked, which is really, okay. I think that's really cool.
Yeah, it is. So then what did you do to prepare both physically and mentally for birth? You mentioned doing a bit of research. Did you do any courses? Can you get into what you did to prepare?
I did so much. Like I said, I became a total birth nerd. Like, I dove right in. So I read a lot of books. Penny Simpkin's The Birth Partner is a huge one. Hypnobirthing by Marie F. Mongan. Pregnancy, Childbirth, and the Newborn by Simpkin as well. So they're all really good, like informative, like kind of like textbook. And then the hypnobirthing was more like philosophical. And I took several courses. So I took a course, a local class that was free. After I did all that reading, I was like, this isn't a great class, but hey, I took it. And then I did an online hypnobirthing course. Pop That Mama. It's her birth box. Highly recommend it. It's awesome. Lots of recorded like meditations, lots of educational bits too. And she also has like a birth plan template on there. Just a lot of cool tools and even some exercises. It's great. And then my doula also did some childbirth education with my partner and I, so he could be included in that.
Amazing. It sounds like you did heaps. So I'll link all of that in the show notes as well. It sounds like some great resources. And do you want to tell us your birth story? So let's start with how you're feeling towards the end of your pregnancy.
Well, I guess if I start at the end of my pregnancy, I was doing pretty well, actually. My energy was up. I was doing exercises every night, lots of stretches. I did what is it? It's like a series of exercises you do to get your baby in the right position.
Was it like spinning babies or something like that?
Yeah, it was one of their like exercise things.
Hi everyone, quick interjection. Brittany messaged me after the podcast episode finished and said that the exercises that she was going through was called the Miles Circuit. And the mile circuit just helps open up and get baby into a really good position for giving birth. And it's something that you can do some research on what positions they are, or you can view a video demonstration on YouTube, but it's a great circuit to do in the lead up to birth to get baby into a good position. Now let's get back into Brittany's story.
I was still working. I'm a floral designer, so I was still on my feet and rocking it out, selling flowers.
That's amazing.
I know. I finally called it like a couple weeks before my due date. I was like, I can't do this anymore. And so I was at home and expecting to have a couple weeks, and surprise, she came a little bit early, a few days early.
Yeah, so how many weeks were you, and what were the first signs of labor?
Let's see, I was 39 plus 3, I think. So she was like a few days earlier, but I felt so crampy. Like, I thought that my stomach was upset. I was like, what did I eat? Like, what's going on? And I just couldn't, like, I tried ginger, I tried chamomile. I was like, nothing is helping my tummy. So I was like, all right, I'm going to make some dinner. Made, like, beef and broccoli and rice. Like, I'm like, okay, it's really clean, right? It's not going to upset my stomach. Went to bed, and I woke up at 2:30 a.m. feeling some pain, some early contractions. That woke me up, and I wasn't able to get back down for a few hours. So I was just quietly laying in bed, riding through these contractions. I was timing them on an app, just like casual, like trying to just like chill. I didn't wake up my husband. I was like, no, I got this. And I was able to fall asleep when the sun came up for a little bit, because I think that natural spike in cortisol is like, okay, like it'll stall your labor a little bit, which is to your advantage if you're in early labor, because then you can sleep. And so, yeah, I slept a little bit. And from then on, when I woke up, I was like just riding through these contractions, and I felt like all of the hypnobirthing really came in handy. The breathing techniques and just all the tips she had, like hop in the shower. I kind of did all the things. I walked around a lot. I tried to eat a little bit. I took a shower. When my fiance was up, he drew me a bath, and I took a bath. Lots of sitting on the toilet, aka dilation station, which isn't like super fun, but necessary, you know, if you want to get it going.
I found it so hard. I was just like, for me, I was just like sat on the toilet. I was like, no, not for me.
Yeah, it's not comfortable, but yeah. I did it. And my doula was calling, like, to check in. She's like, how you doing? She would listen to me. She's like, all right, like, your contractions are, like, this far apart. They're about this long. And keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. And my midwife had told me, go to the hospital when your contractions are at 411. Like, 4 minutes. What is it? 4 minutes apart.
4 minutes apart, 1 minute long.
Lasting over the period of an hour.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. And so I was like, ooh, okay. Before I knew it, like hours had passed, because when you're in labor, time is not a thing. And my contractions were actually at 311. I was tracking them with this app, and Cody's like, tough. I'm like making like my like low, like mooing sounds, and I'm unable to like talk anymore between like during contractions. And he's like, should we go? Like, he's starting to get alarmed. And he's like mellow. He's so mellow. So I was like, oh, I guess. So we called my doula, and she's like, oh yeah, I'll meet you there. And so we made my way down to the car. Lots of stairs in my complex, so that was an adventure. One last contraction leaning on the side of my car before I was able to get in. And we hopped in. He put on some really like soothing music that I had been listening to throughout pregnancy. And I sang in the car until we got there. It's like 15-minute drive. Just trying to keep my zen, like trying to be calm and collected. Yeah. And we got there. We pulled up to the emergency entrance, which I think is what we were supposed to do. I'm not sure. They were like, oh, you're in labor? I'm like, yeah. And they checked me in. All the while, I'm making crazy mooing sounds in their lobby. People were probably looking at me like, what? Because I literally would like, my body would like go limp during a contraction because of the hypnobirthing. And I make these crazy sounds. And they're like, are you having contractions? I'm like, yeah. And so it's taking a while to get me checked in, and I'm not sure. I'm like, what's going on? This is the emergency entrance, right? And it turns out that I went into labor. There were a couple eclipses before and after. So it was like this eclipse portal. And apparently everybody has babies during that time. This was in April this year.
Wow.
And yeah. And so the labor and delivery was just like packed. There were no rooms. And I was like, okay. So yeah, my doula shows up and she's just like watching me and she's like, you're doing great, dude. Like, she's reminding me to relax my hands, relax my face, relax everything, you know, and to go pee, you know, go to the bathroom whenever you can. Yeah, finally we get into a triage room, and I did the majority of my labor in triage because there was no room available.
Really?
Yeah, so we were like, all right, let's just turn this into what we were going to turn the L&D room into. And so we turned on the lights. She opened the shades to let the natural light in. It was probably like late afternoon when we got there, like 5:30 p.m. And she put on like the little LED candles, and we had our music, and we were just making do. And then I did have a cervical check. I had one because I was like, if I'm less than 4 centimeters dilated, I kind of want to go back home. And so I had them check, and I was 4 centimeters dilated. So I'm like, all right, let's do it. So after the cervical check, I'm still sitting on the bed. They had like raised me up because you're like laying down during, and they raised me up, and then boom, like my water broke. And I was like, whoa. And yeah, and then from there, things just like sped up so much. And pretty soon I was like, oh wow, this is intense, right? It's starting to heat up. I'm so grateful for my doula and my partner because they literally supported me physically. They reminded me to stay relaxed. If I was starting to tense, they would catch me, and it was just amazing. I couldn't have asked for better support during that time. Finally, my legs got tired. I was standing for most of the time because it was the most comfortable. Finally, my legs got tired, and I was like, hey, can I get like a peanut ball and lay on my side because I'm getting really sore. Like, my legs are getting really sore. And they're like, oh, sure. They grab one. I lay on my side. And maybe 5 minutes, and my body is like spontaneously pushing in triage on my side. Yeah, and I'm like, what is happening? I was like, to my doula, I was like, I think my body's pushing. And they're like, the nurse is like, what? And they run and grab the OB. I'm like, no, like, my midwife. They're like, oh, she's out of town. And I was like, oh, okay. The OB that runs the practice. They're like, no, he's not on call. I'm like, okay, any OB. And so they just grab like this guy, and and I'm like, all right. He comes in, he's like, where's her epidural? They're like, she doesn't have one. He's like, what? I don't think he's ever seen a physiologic birth before. And I'm like, all right, well, I'm trusting these nurses. I trust my doula. I trust my partner. I trust the knowledge that I've gained, and we're just gonna do it. Like, we're gonna do it. And so they're like, are you pushing? Are you pushing? And I'm not saying anything. I'm like, I think I'm gonna be sick. And my doula, she's like, okay, here's a bag. And I'm like, oh, really in the throes of it. And they're like, oh my gosh, don't push. And my doula's like, you can push. It's okay. You can push. I'm like, okay. And so...
What a woman!
Yeah, and so I'm like, all right. And so they're freaking out because they're like, she's pushing. And so they like roll this bed that I'm on, and I'm on my hands and knees on this bed. The back of the bed is sort of up, so it's like L-shaped. And that was the most comfortable position for me. So they rolled me away down this long corridor, around this corner, into this obscure room. That's like a negative pressure room that they used during COVID, because it was the only one open. And so they're trying to jam this bed into this room, and it has like an L-shaped entrance, and the bed is like not, like they're slamming it into the sides, and I'm like laughing. Because I'm like, this is hilarious. Like, what is going on? And finally they get in the room, and all I remember is feeling that air conditioning and being like, oh yeah, that feels so good. Like that AC, the cool air felt so good because I got so sweaty. I didn't know, you know?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, they get me in place, and they're like, all right, girl, have at it. You can push. So I gave it a go. I wanted to breathe my baby out, but it didn't seem like productive. And so my doula asked if it was okay if they coached my pushing, and so they would count, and it was kind of like, hold your breath and push, push, push for a 10 count. And I think I did that for maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes tops. And she was there, like her head was almost out. My doula's like, do you want to touch her head? I'm like trying to balance because I'm on my hands and knees, and I'm in my head. I couldn't vocalize this, but I'm like, I think if I move my hand to touch her, I might fall over. So I didn't. And she was like, it's in your birth plan. Like, I really want this for you. And I'm like, I can't do it. And then, just a couple more pushes and baby was there. And it was amazing. I felt the ring of fire. It wasn't as intense as I had envisioned it. And it was just the moment that they put your baby on your chest is just amazing. And I didn't want them to wipe her off. I wanted all that good stuff still on her. And I just immediately put her skin to skin and got the blanket over us both. And I was just in awe of this tiny little cutie pie that I had birthed and grown for so long that we were so anxious to meet. I wanted to breastfeed all along. And so I let her do what they call the breast crawl, where baby sniffs out your nipple and then latches themselves. And she did it. Like, she took to it immediately. Her latch was super uncomfortable, of course, because we're learning. But still, I was just in awe. I was like, wow, she did it. Look at those little hands. Look at her little feet. And we're like singing songs to her. And then I'm like, wait a minute, placenta. And because I'm still having contractions, right? Yeah. And they're like, okay, let's check it out. So they applied a little traction on the cord, and it was moving, but not. I wasn't feeling the urge to push it out, really. And so the OB was like, well, she's unmedicated. Let's just give her some time. Because I didn't want a shot of Pitocin or anything like that. I really wanted to just do it myself, you know? And we had waited probably about 40 minutes or so. And I was really grateful for that because you're still birthing something, right? So all of those hormones are still in play. You don't want to be stressed out when you're trying to birth your placenta. And so I was getting a bit impatient though because I'm really uncomfortable. And my doula, who's a midwife in training, she's like, could give it a little tug yourself. Let me ask the nurse. And the nurse kind of like shrugged. She's like, whatever. I'm like, okay, cool. So I like gave it a little tug and I couldn't really get it's like so slippery. And she gave me, she was wiping my forehead with a washcloth the whole time. And so she gave me that. And I actually tugged on the cord. I was like, is it moving? She's like, yeah. And I was like, okay, cool. I think I could feel it coming. And so I tugged on the cord and pushed the placenta out myself. And that was like very empowering, like weirdly empowering. I was like, I just free birthed my placenta. Heck yeah. I felt so cool. And I think the nurse's eyes about popped out of her head. She was like shocked. And I was just like, it's out. I feel great, right? And so, the OB just came and checked me out, and he was like, all right, it's out. He made sure there weren't any pieces. We're good. He checked me for bleeding. He's like, there's no hemorrhaging. It's actually less blood than usual. I'm like, great. And then they let us have the golden hour before they did any tests on baby. And it was just this moment of bliss and a really bad turkey sandwich from the hospital. And it was just perfect. Like, it was exactly what I had envisioned the golden hour to be. Yeah.
Oh, that's so nice.
Yeah.
And did you have any tearing in the end?
Actually, I did. And I was so scared to tear. And I didn't even know that it was happening, to be honest. When I was pushing, I felt ring of fire, but it wasn't at any point like, oh my gosh, I just tore, it wasn't on my mind. And then afterwards, when he had checked me out, he was like, oh yeah, 2nd degree tear. So I did have a few stitches.
It's actually funny that you mentioned that because I don't think I've ever really talked about it in that much detail, how you don't actually notice the tearing when it happens, because I think there is a lot of fear around that and women are like, oh, I'm so scared of tearing. That's like the worst part. But you're so right. In my experience as well, you don't feel it. Like, you think it's going to be this big thing, but it's just it's just not. I mean, certainly the recovery afterwards when you're healing, if you've had stitches, you notice a big difference between not having a tear versus having a tear. The healing's just that little bit longer. But in terms of when it actually happens, it's a non-event, right?
Totally. Yeah, and I would agree with you. The aftercare is more intense if you do tear, excuse me. And I didn't know what to expect. It was my first baby. And yeah, postpartum, I think it was wild.
Yeah, okay. So let's talk about your physical recovery first, and then we'll go into your overall postpartum experience.
Sure. So yeah, like I said, with the tear, it's a lot of just like extra care. Taking your sitz baths, making sure that you are using a peri bottle and just keeping clean. Yeah, and it's tough sometimes when you're breastfeeding because you want to be sitting down. You're going to be sitting down a lot and you have to like sort of find a way that works for you. And physically, my muscles were sore, like my legs and your whole body, because it's like this workout, just bringing a new life into the world. And taking baths was like the best thing ever. That postpartum shower, oh my gosh, can we talk about that? Because chef's kiss, so good. I just when we got home from the hospital, I was like so exhausted, but also I was like, oh, I just need a shower, so I hopped in and I just immediately, like as soon as I got in the water, I just like started crying because I was so grateful that my body had carried me through this entire pregnancy, this entire labor, the birth of my baby, and then the first couple of days in the hospital. I was like, wow. As I'm like washing my feet, I'm like, thanks feet for carrying me, thanks legs. Like it was just beautiful, and it was really healing, like to recognize your body like that, and just very empowering. You feel so strong emotionally after you give birth.
Oh, I love that so much. What a beautiful little like ceremony or ritual that you did for yourself and thanking your body. I think we should all be doing that. Oh, that's got me in all the feels. I love that so much.
Yeah, it was beautiful. It was very intuitive. Like I didn't plan to do that,
Yeah. And then how was your overall postpartum experience and, your emotional well-being and all that sort of thing, and breastfeeding?
It was hard. Those first few days breastfeeding are so challenging because, I had taken breastfeeding classes prior, and I had a breastfeeding counselor, and she always told me it's a dance. You're learning a new dance with your baby. You both don't know the steps at first. It just takes time. And so I found that to be so, so true. Thankfully, the hospital that I gave birth at, they go ahead and schedule you with a lactation consultant 3 days postpartum. And so I needed that appointment so much because I was struggling. I was crying. I was hurting. Baby was fine. She was getting milk, but I was not fine. Like, I was like, ow. And so those lactation consultants, they really helped me with positioning, and they recommended a really good pillow, like a good support pillow for me. And, eventually we got the hang of it. So that was nice. We're still exclusively breastfeeding at 5 months, which I feel really accomplished.
Yeah, especially after you had such a tricky journey, it sounds like, in the beginning.
Yeah, it feels good to be like, all right, we did that, yeah. And yeah, what else? Postpartum, just the emotions, like the baby blues definitely hit me. I don't know if I felt sad, but I was very weepy, and just my partner would be like, why are you crying? I'd be like, I don't know. Or I'd be like, I just love her so much. She's just so precious. Or I'd hear a song and it would touch me. I feel like music sounds different after you have a baby. Everything's different. And so that was tough. Also, just everything being different. Your entire life is turned upside down because you're stepping into this new role of being a mom. And it's powerful. And so I did deal with a little bit of postpartum depression, some anxiety, just with general baby care, because it's oh my gosh, she has this rash. Oh my gosh, she spit up this much. It's every little thing activates your nervous system because you care so deeply for this little baby. And so so I did actually seek some help and got in with a counselor and just go to therapy weekly to make sure that I'm good in that regard, and just talking about it, all the challenges that come up when you're a mom, especially a new mom, and the identity crisis where you're like, whoa, my old life is no more. Now this is my life. And who does that make me besides mom, right? So it's a beautiful journey, but also like kind of a hard one when you're going through it.
It's a total rebirth of yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, it's a massive journey. And I'm so glad that you talked about that, because I think it's quite common. And I think back in the day, we used to have this village environment where wise women would be all around us, helping us through navigating this massive shift in our identity, I suppose. And now in today's society, we're very isolated and alone, and we don't have that village community around us anymore. So I think it happens a lot. And I just hope that more and more women out there get help and really lean on their support network around them to get, meals, or hold the baby if they want to take a shower, or light chores, those sorts of things, and bring back that village community.
Yeah, that's definitely something I felt was lacking. I felt like so overwhelmed. Oh my gosh, laundry? Not even my first thought. Like, not even my second thought,
Yeah.
And, it's great that I had a wonderful partner, but he had to go back to work in like 2 weeks. And I'm like, all right, me and baby, let's figure it out. And it's hard when you're by yourself. We did it though. But yeah, I really wish that community for everyone. I did do one good thing, and that was hire a postpartum doula. And she is,
great.
She is wonderful. She came and she made me some herbal medicine. She helped me wrap my belly up postpartum. She put the baby down for a nap. She talked with me about my feelings. It was just like, she's made meals, she's cleaned up, she's taken the trash out for us, like all those little things that go so far. Yeah. Such an angel. I'm just like so grateful to have them. And yeah, it was a trip. Now, like 5 months postpartum, I'm feeling more like myself, healing physically. The tear is better. I got some pelvic floor physical therapy that I go to. That's so important if you can get into that.
Totally.
Day and night difference. And yeah, just slowly you do start to feel more like you as you're in this new role over time.
Yeah. So I've loved hearing your birth story. What would you say one of your most cherished moments or aspects of your birth experience was, before we wrap things up?
Just like seeing my fiance step it up and be doing the hip squeezes and supporting me physically and putting on the right music. He knew exactly what to say, exactly what to do in the moment as I was laboring. And then later on, after the baby was here, seeing him hold her for the first time, and just the sheer look of love on his face as he gazed into her little eyes was just so beautiful. I definitely would say that I cherish that the most.
Oh, that's so nice. And to wrap things up, what general advice to do with pregnancy, birth, or postpartum could you offer to women based on your journey?
I guess, being the nerd that I am, education is huge. Hire a doula, birth and postpartum if you can, or just birth. You touched on this, but have some meals ready, or have a meal plan or meal train set up so you know that there's food. It's one less thing for you to worry about when you're taking care of baby. And during labor, express yourself, move around, make your sounds, do what you have to do because that's your time, and be uninhibited because this is the most powerful experience you'll probably have, and just let yourself step into that power. Allow yourself to be powerful and know that you can do it.
Oh, that's amazing. I love all of that advice. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I've loved hearing your birth story, and I love how much research you put into all aspects of your pregnancy, birth, and postpartum so that you had the best and nourishing experience that you could possibly have. I've loved your story, so thank you so much.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Mama Village podcast. Check out the show notes for a link to the Mama Village Instagram page where I upload pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and motherhood resources. Please let me know what you think of today's show and what you would like to hear from the podcast by leaving a rating and review. If you like the show, please subscribe and leave a review on your podcast platform. If you would like to share your positive pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and motherhood story, or if you have education in the space to share, please send me a direct message on Instagram or email the.mamavillage@outlook.com. For all my listeners out there, thank you for your continuing support, and I will speak to you all in next week's episode.